This video is sponsored by Prodigy. So we all know camera cutouts aren't new or anything. I mean, brands like Samsung and ZTE have already found ways to physically hide them under the display. With the iPhone 14 Pro, Apple's finally giving up the notch and moving to a hole punch / pill design. They might be late, but in very Apple-like fashion, they somehow found a way to make the cutout a selling point, building a whole new interface around it and marketing it as part of the phone's identity. Like, seriously, that's something only Apple could pull off. Hi everyone, Thao here. So the iPhone 14 Pro is the first iPhone I've been this excited to test out in years. The iPhone is such a mature product that we don't get big changes that often anymore, so to get something as unique and fresh as Dynamic Island, I had to test it, and I totally respect that Apple is trying something new. Dynamic Island is a very interesting name, by the way. Basically, instead of just accepting the cutout, they're embracing it, using the pixels around it combined with next level animations to show important alerts and activities. Some examples of alerts include toggling the mute switch, receiving an incoming call, the charging status, Face ID, or when your AirPods are connected. I was kind of surprised that notifications like messages don't animate from the pill. Instead, they still drop down from above like in previous iPhones. Before we dive any deeper into Dynamic Island, check out all the goodies that today's sponsor, Prodigy, has for your brand new iPhone. Not only are their cases protective, they have some of the most stylish designs, period. Their bestsellers, Safety Steel and Superstar, are perfect examples. From something a little more glamorous to a simple, clear classic that you can now easily dress up with their brand new Feel Me inserts. With Safety Neo or Flow, you've got a great way to add a splash of color. This lilac on deep purple is seriously beautiful. For something more functional, their Kick It case has a built-in kickstand that wraps right around the cutout, while the 2-in-1 Folio Mag wallet allows you to go with or without the bulk. And get this, a wireless to charge even with the wallet on. All cases are military-grade drop tested, with the majority being MagSafe ready. So check out their entire lineup, including some really cool accessories, by clicking the link below. And don't forget to use my code to save 30%. The Dynamic Island live activities are a little more interesting in that you can interact with them. Live activities include things like ongoing calls, timers, turn-by-turn directions in Apple Maps, voice recordings, or when a device is connected to your personal hotspot. A tap opens up the app itself, and a long press brings up a pop-up that you can actually interact with. For example, you can stop a voice recording and a navigation in Maps, or switch audio sources and hang up while on a call. It's kind of an interesting way to bring semi-multitasking to the iPhone. In all the demos I saw, you could have 2 live activities displayed at the same time, with the second one being pushed to the right in its own little bubble. What I wanted to know was, what happens if you have 3 live activities? Turns out it's limited to only 2, and I guess the system will decide which ones to give Dynamic Island priority to. For example, a phone call gets priority over navigation in Maps, which gets priority over music, which gets priority over a timer. So yeah, right now, Dynamic Island can only showcase 2 at a time. If you listen to a lot of music, the music player is likely going to be the thing that spends the most time in your Dynamic Island. I tested it with Apple Music, YouTube Music, and Amazon Music. All 3 interacted perfectly with it, which is nice considering it's a brand new feature. I'm a little conflicted on how much more convenient it actually is though, at least in terms of media controls. You already have the ability to swipe down from the top left corner to access the notification center, which gives you the same media controls. You could actually argue that a long press takes a little longer than a swipe. I guess one benefit of the Dynamic Island's media controls over the notification center is that it doesn't take over the entire screen. Like, I can still see and keep an eye on whatever app I'm in. A concern I've seen floating around is that it's not very one-handed friendly. And yeah, it definitely isn't. I mean, let's be honest, most phones these days are 2-handed devices, unless you have massive hands. I've read that a future update will make Dynamic Island compatible with reachability. So basically, it'll slide down with the rest of the UI, making it easier for one-handed use. Adding on to that, because you're constantly tapping and pressing on the pill, fingerprints are also unavoidable. So be prepared to wipe your selfie camera down a little more frequently. In the week that I've had it so far, it hasn't really been an issue, but that's definitely a drawback when you compare it to the notch, which you would never touch or interact with. While we're on the whole pill versus notch comparison, I'll take the pill over the notch any day. It just seems to fit the whole bubbly, round aesthetics that iPhones have. If you look closely, the pill actually sits slightly lower than the notch. Side by side with my 13 Pro, you can see that the entire home screen UI is shifted down ever so slightly, and the status bar at the top takes up a little more space. There's no difference when watching 16:9 content, but slightly wider content will get cut off by the pill, like this, which is not ideal. If you pinch to zoom, this is how both look. I'll leave it up to you to decide which one looks better. In general, I'm a fan of Dynamic Island. Don't expect it to make using your iPhone more efficient or turn it into a multitasking machine. It's just another way to get the same things done, with a splash more fun. At the end of the day, it's still a cutout most of the time that happens to have some functionality some of the time. Either way, swiping apps into the pill is surprisingly satisfying, and the shape-shifting concept is honestly really cool. I love how playful the whole experience is, and although it doesn't drastically change the iPhone experience, like I said, it's fresh and sort of a lot of fun to interact with. At least for now. I'm sure the novelty will wear off eventually, but things should get more interesting once more apps start to utilize it. The other big feature that's come to the iPhone 14 Pro this year is the AlwaysOn Display. Android phones have been doing always-on displays for a while now, and usually have it so only the clock, some notifications, and maybe a widget are highlighted, with the rest of the display being pitch black. That's of course to save battery. Apple, as usual, does things a little differently. What they've done is kept the entire lock screen intact and just dimmed the whole thing. That includes everything from the clock, date, widgets, notifications, any live actions, and even the lock screen wallpaper itself. If you like to showcase album covers on your lock screen, that also translates to the always-on display as well. Even notifications animate just like they would on your lock screen. You do lose some of the more dynamic parts like any moving animations on the music player or the seconds ticker on a timer, for example. But in general, everything that's on your lock screen stays on your always-on display. To wake it up, you can either tap on the display, hit the power button, or just pick the phone up itself. It's definitely an interesting take on a feature that I've used on many other phones. I can't say if it's better or worse, it's just different. Brightness is probably a little too high. It would have been nice if Apple gave us the option to dim it a little, especially at night. If you go into the Do Not Disturb settings, you are given an option to dim the lock screen, which helps, but that only helps when your phone is set to Do Not Disturb. I was also surprised that there wasn't an easy way to schedule it to turn off automatically, like overnight, for example. Turns out you need to set up a sleep-focused schedule, which turns off the always-on display automatically during those hours. I'll have to do more testing, but so far, the battery does seem to be taking a hit as you'd expect. I left it on overnight for a couple of days and the phone lost like 5% per night, which isn't bad at all, but iPhones usually have amazing standby battery drain. 1 to 2% is normally what I'm used to with iPhones, so we'll have to do a bit more testing. If you're not a fan, you can always toggle the always-on display completely off in the settings. Anyways, if you own an iPhone 14 Pro or 14 Pro Max, what are your thoughts on Dynamic Island and the always-on display? As for my thoughts on the rest of the phone, including iOS 16 and the camera upgrades, stay tuned for my full review in the coming weeks. I have a newborn, so you know I'm going to be putting these cameras to work. As usual, thank you so much for watching. Until the next one, I'm out of here.